Chancellor Schussel, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kishore Mahbubani. I'm the Dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. Whenever I make an introduction, I make 3 points. I'm going to make 2 brief points and 1 slightly longer point. The first brief point is about Europe and why, in some ways, this lecture by Chancellor Schussel is very timely. Because as you all know, Europe is going through a moment of great change, and in some ways also great turmoil. I don't know how many of you are buying euros or selling euros, but you can see what's happening in the markets. But that's only a surface problem. Europe is actually, as you know, going through even deeper changes. It's now assumed a new form. It has a new president, a new foreign minister, and essentially a new Europe is emerging. And therefore, it's very timely that we have a statesman of the stature of Chancellor Schussel coming to us to speak about Europe. And I must say, I like his title, Can Europeans Still Think? It reminds me that when I published my book, Can Asians Think? Over a decade ago, an African approached me and said to me, Kishore, can you please write a book called Can Africans Think? I said, no, only an African can write that book. I cannot write that book. So you're very brave, Chancellor Schussel, to address this topic today. My second point actually is about Asia, and to emphasize that Asia too, as you all know, is going through great changes now. And indeed, we are going through remarkable transformations here. And precisely because Europe is going through a remarkable transformation, Asia is going through remarkable transformations, this is the best time to have a very deep and serious dialogue between Asia and Europe. And this is why, again, this lecture by you is very timely today. We must bring together Asia and Europe as we move ahead into a new world order. My third and most important point is, of course, about the speaker. I suspect many of you already know that he's had a very distinguished career. He joined politics in 1989. He was appointed Minister for Economic Affairs in the coalition government under Chancellor Franz Vranitzky. In 1995, he became the OVP's national leader, Vice Chancellor and Foreign Minister. And in 2000, as you know, he became the Austrian Chancellor, a post he held until January 2007. Now, these are the bare-bone facts. But what did he do and accomplish during his stay in politics? And this is where, fortunately, the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, even though it is a relatively small school, has got an Austrian professor. And the Austrian professor, Victor Meyer-Schonberger, sent me a very nice note, which I want to read to you, 3 paragraphs from it, because it captures brilliantly the remarkable contributions made by our speaker today. And this is the quote. 2 decades ago, Austria, with its then 7 million people, was a small nation squeezed against the Iron Curtain, outside of NATO's protective umbrella and inside of the Soviet Union's nuclear battle plans. Its economy was solid, but saddled with state-owned heavy industry, and its politics shaped by what seemed like a never-ending grand coalition between the 2 major parties commanding 80% of the popular vote. Everything was divided into a conservative and a social democratic slice of life, from kindergartens and sports clubs to banks and undertakers. Austria was stable. In 1989, Dr. Wolfgang Schussel, a young and energetic politician who had cut his teeth as a competent master negotiator on behalf of Austrian business with trade unions, became Austria's Minister for Trade Industry. With the downfall of the Soviet Union, the lifting of the Iron Curtain, and the end of the Cold War, he saw opportunities where others saw challenges. Over these 2 decades, first as minister, then as Vice Chancellor and Minister of Foreign Affairs, and finally as Chancellor, Dr. Schussel set about capturing these opportunities and thus shaping Austria. In the 1990s, he and his colleagues in the government moved Austria into the European Union, opened markets, liberalized entire sectors like telecommunications, privatized government-owned industries, and in the process propelled Austria into the top league of competitive nations worldwide. Not content with reshaping the economy, in the past decade, Dr. Schussel reshaped the political landscape in Austria. He broke with conventional taboos of grand coalitions and cozy political arrangements. He facilitated the emergence of a political culture more diverse, lively, and pluralistic than ever before since 1945. If Obama's leadership is about the audacity of hope, Dr. Schussel's leadership has been about the audacity of change, the belief that societies can and must change. And clearly, he has also believed that leaders must demonstrate guts, and he has done so. And this is why it gives us particularly pleasure to welcome him to our school, because one of the missions of our school is to try and produce the next generation of leaders, primarily for Asia and hopefully for the world too. But the best way to generate new leaders is to bring to them outstanding leaders who can share with them their experience and describe what they have done. And for this, Dr. Schussel, you've done the school a great favor. And I thank you very much for coming here, for spending the week with our school, and for delivering this lecture. Thank you very much.
So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and after this brilliant advertising, personal advertising of Kishore, I'm really proud to be here, more proud than ever. And I came on the weekend, before the weekend, to Singapore to learn a little bit and to get a feeling how Singapore is, how it ticks, what are the problems, what are the achievements. And it's really fascinating for me to see how this city, this nation emerged, and I will come later on to what I found in similarities and probably common achievements. Now, the title of my lecture is, of course, has something to do with Professor Mahbubani's brilliant book about Asia, Can Asians Think? And on the first glimpse, everybody would say, yes, Asians can think, Europeans can think. They did it, we did it for centuries, and we did it with astonishing success. On the second glimpse, on the second more deeper view, we have to analyze the substance, how Europeans think, in which direction they think, which way. Is it more short-term oriented? Is it more thinking thoughts in a long-term oriented way? Is it inward-looking, outward-looking? So we should analyze how Europeans think. And to understand how we think, it's necessary to know a little bit about European history. I will not bore you with details, but to understand that Europe had different phases, of course, in our history for millennia. After the fall of the Roman Empire, this was the first worldwide empire for our known world at that time, Europe was for centuries blocked, totally blocked by internal fights, power struggles, a typically tribal society with border disputes, with religious tensions, whatever. And then came the 14th and 15th century, the age of discoveries. And this changed everything. By the way, it's interesting to learn that 100 years before Christopher Columbus traveled around the world, a Chinese admiral, Hen, I think was his name, was also traveling around with many more ships, better equipped, better technology. But he was stopped then by the death of the former emperor, and the next emperor said, no, we have different priorities, stop, and threatened by death penalty those who built big ships and traveling around and detecting new continents, etc. So it's quite interesting to see. And probably history would have been completely different. But For us, the 14th and 15th century, the age of enlightenment, the age of discoveries, changed everything. It was an enormous economic development, while China and India remained for 500-600 years around the same economic level. The Europeans had a tremendous success from sevenfold increase of their economy from $600 to $4,500 at that time. But a heavy price was paid: colonization, expropriation of the third world, suppression of different societies, etc. And this history exploded in the 20th century with 2 world wars, both caused from European soil, costing more than 100 million victims, mostly on the civilian side, testing 2 terrible ideologies. One was Nazism, and the other was communism. And to understand Europe today, we should know that today's European Union was founded, was created directly on the ruins of the World War II. The idea of United States of Europe, it's an older idea, by the way, created by an Austrian, Baron Coudenhove-Kalergi in the 20s. But anyway, political weight gained this idea by Winston Churchill's famous speech at the University of Zurich. Same George Marshall made his famous speech also on the university. So universities are always important for political innovations. So Churchill developed first this idea of United States of Europe, by the way, without Great Britain, but the continental Europe. And from that point on, the idea gained weight and was realized. And it was accelerated in this magic year, 1989. You mentioned my personal career. I'm now 30 years in Parliament, more than 30 years in Parliament. I was 18 years in government. And I started as a young Minister for Economic Affairs exactly in the year 89, which was for us a magic year. Because Austria, as you said, it was half of our border, 1,300 kilometers, were surrounded or blocked by the Iron Curtain. So nearly half of our border was Iron Curtain, blocked. And to understand the difficult situation, my first constituency was the northern part of Austria, directly located on the border to Czechoslovakia. We had every week we had problems and terrible incidents along our border. It was a death zone with mines, with machine gun nests, etc. The younger generation have no idea anymore how it really was 20 years ago, or a little bit more than that. And for us, before the World War II, we had more trade, for instance, with Czechoslovakia than with Germany. More trade with Czechoslovakia than with Germany. After World War II, Iron Curtain, everything was blocked. So to understand the difficulty being between NATO and Warsaw Pact, this meant something for us. And then this magic, this miracle appeared. Nobody believed a few weeks before what was really going on. What is the future, what will bring the future for us. And this magic year, collapse of communism, fall of the Iron Curtain, changed everything. And we grabbed the opportunity. I, as a young Minister for Economic Affairs, the first thing I started, what can we do? We invited, for instance, Czech, Slovak, Hungarian business people, managers. So not the top level, but the second and third level. We trained during the next 10 years around 50,000 business people from Central and Eastern Europe. A very cheap program, by the way. Not very much, not very expensive. But it worked, and it was an enormous investment in our own future, because those who learned, who worked with us, cooperated with us, went back, had some more steps, positive steps in their career, and were friends of Austria, and we established a very good and a very effective network. 20 years now, away from this magic year, looking back, we see much clearer. In the same year, by the way, we applied for membership to the European Union, so 89. and completed membership negotiations 5 years later. 94, 95, we became member of the European Union. So looking back, it was a hell of a ride. At the very same moment, we had 4, 5, 6 big projects in the same way to handle. One was the single market, a fascinating idea, not only trade, but really a single market with everything, with tenders, with labor market, etc., with everything what is constituting a market internally. Then enlargement. We doubled within 12 years, more than doubled the number of member states from 12 to 27. We developed a new European currency, the common currency, the euro. We had different talks on a new treaty because we knew enlargement needs more deeper integration and we need a new treaty for that. The constitution failed, but now we have the Lisbon Treaty. Later we'll speak on that. And we created new institutions. It was a fascinating time. Really, at the same time, 5, 6 big projects for the European Union. Of course, this created problems and positive opportunities. I will speak first on the problems. For these years, we were too much inward-looking. We were too much concentrated on our own agenda. You can explain it, why, but it was too much. We were too much integrated in our own quarrels, fighting with national interests, with the treaties. Don't forget, we had 20 different national referenda in these years. On should Sweden participate in the euro? The answer was no. Should 9 member states become member of the European Union? New member states. All of them said yes. 1, Norway, said no. Then the treaty, the constitution. 3 countries said yes. 3 countries said no. Then on the Lisbon Treaty, Ireland said yes, and then 1 year later, no. So it was very complicated. Just to explain how it was necessary a little bit to concentrate on the internal agenda, but now I hope it's over with the Lisbon Treaty. The second problem is we forgot that the single market, which is so important, it was an enormous machinery, an engine for European development, is still not completed. For instance, the labor market is still a little bit fragmented. Energy market is still over-regulated and not open for everybody. Financial sector, services, is not completely liberalized within the European Union. Just to give you an idea what that means, not completing the single market, as an economist, I would estimate in the minimum there is a reservoir of 1% plus additional growth rate per year for the European Union as such. So completing the single market would be one of the real positive growth factors with low costs. Some maybe fights with unions or lobby group anyway, but it would be one of the positive signs for the next future. And then the Eurozone. In my opinion, the Eurozone, and I was part of that, the Eurozone was a perfect success. The normal economic theory, conventional wisdom would say, first you need a common economic policy, a common coherent tax policy, fiscal policy, labor market policy, and then at the end, crowning theory, at the end you can finalize these achievements with a common currency. We did it the other way around. We started with a core of countries, the Eurozone, and until now it is a big success, no doubt about it. By the way, we started with $1.17 versus €1. Now then we went down 0.85 or so for a dollar compared with €1. Now we are 1.36 or so. The problem is, and this is not solved until now, we are working without a script. We have clear book of rules, 3% deficit, not more. If more, then there is a clear procedure, monitoring, criticizing, etc. But no sanctions, no real sanctions. And more, nobody have even thought about the possibility that a member state is not willing or not capable to fulfill the criteria. So this is now the real test for the Eurozone. Greece, by the way, and I'm always optimistic, Greece, the Greek economy is, let's say, 2.5% share of the Eurozone as such. So Greek can never endanger the Eurozone. But it's a test case. And if Greece fails, then you could have a domino effect to other Eurozone members. If Greece succeeds, then it's a big push forward for the credibility of the Eurozone. So in my opinion, don't be shy. Don't believe those who are now speculating against Euro, creating rumors that there's a bubble of public debts now emerging and the sovereign defaults are coming up. This is nonsense. And in my opinion, the financial community is a little bit talking too much. And they are always looking around where is the next negative news, the next negative message we can deliver to newspapers, etc. So there's a little bit too much discussions and gossip. And I think the new Greek government, George Papandreou, I know him quite well. We were together foreign ministers in my time. He's a social democrat, I'm a Christian democrat, a conservative. I trust him. He is willing to deliver. And there will be an absolute clear and tough monitoring from the side of the European Union, the Commission, and the ECB. There are also positive news, and I will refer to that, because one is don't underestimate and write off Europe too soon. Europe is still one of the most effective and most competitive economic zones. It's the most important partner for ASEAN, for your exports, for instance. Not trade as a whole, but anyway, I think for your goods and your products, Europe is anyway the biggest market, and it will remain so. We are the biggest economic area in the world, bigger than the US. We have the same competitiveness, or some countries even more competitiveness than the United States. We are absorbing every year 40 to 50% of the international foreign direct investments to the European Union. We have a big trade surplus, not with ASEAN countries, but anyway, we are very competitive on the global scene. And more important, what we achieved, stability, peace, prosperity for our people, what is written down in the American Constitution, the pursuit of happiness, this is exactly what is the European reality. Ask people if they are satisfied or happy de facto, more or less, in their life quality, etc. So I think the European way of life is not outdated, in contrary. The balance of competitiveness on one hand, social inclusion on the other hand, life quality, sustainability, this is something. And one of the mottos of the European Union is unity in diversity. And this is an art in itself. So to say, to the management of diversity, this is something what the European Union achieved during the last decades. We have 27 members, officially 23 languages, unofficially more than 100, 150 completely different regional dialects. We have different cultural heritage, different historic experiences, different religions. Don't forget that more than 20 million Muslims are living inside the European Union. And if you go, for instance, travel to London, well known to Singapore, on a given day, you would find 50 different nationalities consisting of more than 5,000 people on a given day. On a given day in London, more than 300 different languages are spoken. And the same goes for, in a different way, for my hometown, Vienna. If you take the young children entering in school, I was surprised, really surprised, learning that 50% of them do not regularly speak German at home. 50% of the school beginners, 6 years old, coming to schools, are not regularly speak German at home. So you can see this as a problem, And in some parts it is, because you have to integrate these people, you have to train them maybe better, invest more, especially in language training. On the other hand, it's an enormous opportunity. So I think Europe today is completely different than the gray Europe 20, 30 years ago. It's a completely different society which we should develop, and we should really exploit for the purpose of the future. And now I spoke about the Lisbon Treaty. The Lisbon Treaty is not perfect, not at all, but it is a new instrument for Europe as a global actor. I avoid global player because I think foreign policy is not a game. It's not to play something, but it's to act. And I think this Lisbon Treaty, first of all, empowers the parliaments much more. So the European Parliament has now a full say, is a really co-decision power in the decision-making and building process of the European Union. But also the national parliaments are now more integrated, which is important because you can't always centralize decisions on the European level, ministerial council, parliament, etc. You have to integrate the national communities. Then we have much more majority voting. In previous years, when the European Union started, everything was unanimous. And unanimity means always you have to take the pace of the slowest. This is not good. You have to look for a consensus, but anyway, if something is ripe to be decided, then you have to be tough to get a decision. And even the threat that a qualified majority is in favor of something ends up with de facto in most cases with a unanimous decision. Then energy, climate, or even home affairs, justice questions are now more integrated, are now European policy matters, which is important because nobody in Europe, not even the biggest one like Germany, can handle the energy question or the climate change question alone. So there is a need for a European position. And we have new institutions, which is, of course, the most complicated issue. Until now, we had the 6 months rotating presidency, and I have a relatively good experience with that. I was for 12 years member of the European Council. I attended around 50 or 60 different council meetings of foreign ministers. I was in '98 the chairman, the president of the Council of Foreign Ministers. I attended 60 European councils of heads of government and presidents. I was the president of the European Council in 2006, so I have some experience for that. And this 6 months rotating presidency is nonsense, because you can't reinvent future politics every 6 months. It doesn't make sense to create the 17th plan how to settle peace in Middle East is nonsense. This is not possible. And now we have one permanent president. It is now in Belgium, Herman van Rompuy, for the next 2.5 years. He is president of the European Council. And more important, we have for the next 5 years one European foreign minister, Lady Ashton, and she's also chairing the Council of Foreign Ministers. So this gives a continuing process, a continuing discussion and evaluation of foreign policy for the European Union, and plus the development of an external diplomatic service for the European Union. So this is de facto the possibility and the tool, the instrument that Europe can play a role on the international sector. But I say it clearly, this is a hope. Nobody can be sure. There are some criticism. We have chosen the wrong persons. I think give them a chance. In all societies, in all political systems, it's better to give them a chance, to encourage them, than to disencourage them from the very beginning. Now, Kishore already said it, we are entering in a very different world, a changing world. The rise of Asia, China, India, ASEAN, but also the BRICS, Russia, Brazil, etc. So this is a new momentum. Personally, I welcome this development. I have no desire, coming from a small country, I have no desire for an hegemon who tells me what to do. The time of a hegemon is over, and this is good. It's good for the hegemon, by the way, and it's good for us. And I hope there will be not a future of two hegemons, G2 or G3. I hope we will entering in a more colorful, more multipolar world. It will be a complicated world, no doubt about it. But it's interesting to see what can be done. And I think it's good that Asia develops their own ideas, is willing to show their own cultural heritage. It's important for us to learn the contribution of Asian philosophers, Asian scientists, Asian business people, or politicians. And we can learn a lot. Even we in Europe, for instance, a lot of problems are forgotten. For instance, family values. This is something what is a real problem for our societies. And I think we should see how Asia keeps family values really in the first priority. Or the importance of religious beliefs or values, not in an intolerant way, but in a tolerant way. It's very important. There are two main theses today discussed among politicians or scientists or on universities. One thesis is a clash of cultures and civilizations is unavoidable. This is Huntington's thesis. And the second thesis is the homogenization thesis. Both sides, in my opinion, have good arguments. On one hand, nobody can believe if we live in a global village on the same planet, we can remain unaffected if poverty, war, terror threats, climate change is on the way and is there. So everybody is affected. So this points clearly to the way that there is a need for a globalized and more homogeneous world. On the other hand, the clash theory has points to the development that there is an increasing salience of ethnicity in our societies in Asia as well as in Europe or in America or elsewhere. And the fear of cultural erosion, of undermining, so to say, the national or regional identity is felt in the same way among citizens in Asia or in Europe or in America. And there is a widening gap between the so-called elites in our societies. These elites live a kind of a globalized culture. They speak the same language. They are able to talk among themselves about the same problems. They know what is, so to say, the problem of the day, the bubble of tomorrow, the solution, the hope of next year, the incoming president or the outgoing president, whatever. So this is a globalized elite. But the gap between those who live this globalized culture and the rest of the population is widening. This is a big problem, by the way. So what can we do? My answer is at the end of my part to open the discussion is we can do a lot together. I think ASEAN and Europe, the European Union, are both around 500 million people. You are a little bit more, we are a little bit less. We have a lot in common. ASEAN guaranteed peace for the region for more than 40 years. European Union guaranteed peace for more than 50 years. In both regions, we have an enormous cultural variety, linguistic diversity, and we would never accept a directoire from outside, big brother, big hegemon, whatever. And both regions are exposed to external or internal threats. May it be terror, may it be drug trafficking, whatever. And we should see the world as a shared responsibility against environmental degradation, against poverty, against war, against nuclear threats. Probably you remember it was one of these famous election sentences of Bill Clinton's first campaign. He said, "It's the economy, stupid." You fool, remember everything in politics is about money, is about economic growth, about jobs. And I hesitated always and now I'm much clearer, it is not always the economy, stupid or not stupid. It is much more. It is freedom of individuals. It is about human rights. It is the question of, as I already said it, family values, protection of children. How can we empower the emerging power of women? I mean, this is, by the way, the explanation why so many Arab countries are failing in their potential. Because if you really, from the very beginning, say more than 50% of your talents are not used or are not used in the right way, stupid. So how to empower, how to give women the right chances, how to invest more in education or in sustainability. And Singapore for me is fascinating because I think it's like Vienna. Enormous potential of a green lung, very well-run city, sustainable development, good planning. This is important, not oriented at what is, so to say, the shareholders' view next quartal or the next 3 months, or what is the poll of next week, but really developing a long-term perspective and light build, a kind of a vision, what we can achieve, what we want to achieve. Interested in the life quality of people. And I think this idea of sustainability is something we should have in mind. And there is something what we discussed just before, Professor Mahbubani and I myself. As an economist, I always complain about the fact that we are measuring our welfare only in quantitative economic figures and facts. Production, exports, number of cars, budget figures, TV screens, whatever. But this is only one important element. So no doubt about the hard facts are important. But what about healthcare? What about education? What about the human potential, brain power? It is one of the most important resources in our societies. So let's develop better measures for welfare and the role of nations. And I think in this case, small and medium-sized states have a very important role to play. It's like in business. In my country, for instance, and same in Europe, 99% of the companies are small and medium-sized companies. But these companies are silent. Mostly, they have no voice in political terms. Everybody's interested in what the big companies are doing, developing. Well, if they have a problem, everybody runs and teases them and causes them. But the small and medium-sized companies pay 70% of the taxes, employ 2/3 of our people, of our workers, educate 70% of our younger generation as apprentices, etc. So the same goes, by the way, for small and medium-sized countries. I think they can play an important role. In the European Union, for instance, we have the big five, big six. Germany, France, Great Britain, Italy, Spain, and Poland, eventually Poland. Fine. They never agree on all items. They meet in a lot of issues, other countries entering and changing, so to say, the way to discuss a problem. So this is important, not only as a mediator, but for instance, one of the smallest countries in Europe is Luxembourg. And Jean-Claude Juncker always was seen as one of the most talented mediator, negotiator. If the big ones cannot talk to each other, then the smaller but the medium-sized countries come in and can deal and can solve something. Dominique Moissy, probably some of you know him, wrote a very interesting book. It's called Geopolitics of Emotions. A very interesting argument. And he speaks about 3 types of cultures. The culture of hope, the culture of humiliation, and the culture of angst, defensive mood. And you can judge yourself who is who and which country has which culture. My opinion is, I think small and medium-sized countries should develop the power of a culture of hope. This is important. And I think this is something what Singapore did in the last decades. Think about when Malaysia kicked Singapore out 40 years ago. What happened? Had anybody even thought about the possibility that Singapore could emerge as one of the role models in such a region? No, nobody. Austria is the same model in a different way. 40 years ago, we were poor. In 48, the United Nations said Austria is the country most endangered by hunger and starvation. We got the most share of the Marshall Plan because we were so poor and totally destroyed. Today we are one of the richest nations. So small countries can give an impression of a culture of hope, and this is important. And we need for this, to give this approach, we need a proactive approach. Yes, we Europeans can think and must think, but we must think not what happens next month or what happens next to our border. But we have to be oriented in a long-term perspective and widening our view. We need a light build. We need partners in Singapore, in Jordan, in Canada, in Japan, in Abu Dhabi, in Norway, wherever. There are a lot of partners around in the world, and I think it was my idea when G8 emerged, why shouldn't we create a different group of the, let's say, the I8, the innovative 8, G8, and the innovative 8, or the I20 or whatever. But I think there's the need to exchange views. One of my most interesting booklets was when I traveled to America and other parts of the world to look at positive examples. Ideen, die gehen. In German it sounds better because it's a rhyme. In English, ideas that work. Museums in America, social innovations in Africa, privatization in Great Britain, etc. So I think there's a need for an exchange of ideas and innovations. We need to become an innovative society in e-government, e-health, in effective services for energy or climate or whatever. University cooperation, by the way, is one of the most effective ways to exchange views. So Europe can think, must think. We cannot become only a comfort zone for a leisure paradise for retired people. We must be and remain a learning, an innovative, a cooperative continent. Then I'm absolutely sure the future will be bright. Not alone for Europe, but also with partners like Singapore or the ASEAN countries. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Wolfgang. That was an excellent...
Good. Just a test.
That was an excellent start. And I always have the privilege as moderator to ask you the first question. And this may be a slightly surprising question. But you know, in my opening remarks, I spoke about leadership and what a difference your leadership made to Austria. And you mentioned in your remarks you had met a leader like Juncker, who's obviously a good mediator. Now, I won't ask you who's the best leader you met and who's the worst leader you met, because I don't think you want to go on record saying that. But can you give us some examples for some of our students of good leaders you met and whom you would see as role models for our students at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, whom you've dealt with personally and interacted with?
It's a good question, but it's hard to answer. I think one of the best politicians I've ever met was Helmut Kohl. Helmut Kohl has a special talent. He was historian, by the way. Very, very intelligent. He knew everything about history, and he could grab the moment. In Greek In the Greek language, there is a word called kairos. Not? Stavros, you know it, not? Kairos. Kairos, this is, you cannot translate it really. This is the right moment, not catching the right moment. This is the kairos. And a good politician must be able to see, is it now the right time or not? Grabbing, and if, then grab it. Bismarck said, if the coat of history flies through the room, you should grab it. Helmut Kohl did it. And he did it with enormous energy. He didn't look left and right. He didn't listen too much to his advisors. For instance, the exchange rate of Eastmark and Westmark was always disputed. I didn't find a single economist that said 1-to-1 is fair, is possible. Helmut Kohl said, look, after a long, exhausting discussion, he said, look, this is nice, please go home. We negotiated now for 16 hours, go home, sleep a little bit, and tomorrow you will explain me how we can make 1-to-1. Otherwise, it is not possible. It was a clear decision, a political decision, and it was the only possible decision. And the second, kairos, seeing kairos, grabbing the right moment. And the second point is trust. I think only politicians are good politicians if they can create, if they trust people, the right people, of course, and if they can create a climate of trust. Again, Helmut Kohl, he trusted 100% Mikhail Gorbachev. And Gorbachev trusted 100% Helmut Kohl. And by the way, George Bush Sr. as well. Without that trust, the magic would have gone. Without the trust, Shevardnadze said, Foreign Minister of Russia, of Soviet Union at the time, if Gorbachev would not have been trusted so much to Helmut Kohl, maybe the demand for a military intervention coming from East Germany, DDR, and Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia, and what was it, Bulgaria, I think, or Romania, would have led to a bloodbath. So, kairos and trust. And of course, good communication, but this is self-evident.
Great. Thank you. You can see that he is a great admirer of Chancellor Kohl.
Yeah.
Next question. Please, go ahead. Come to the mic, yes. Identify yourself and preferably a short, sharp question.
Yes. I'm from Indonesia. From your lecture, and also from this title of this lecture, my question is not can European think, but how European thinks? How? So, about the European development, do you think that many historians, economists, economic historians especially, would say that European development is linear or progressively changing, and Asia is more cyclic or unchanging? And do you believe that, how Europeans still think that European history is the only development history that is linear? Especially, I remember that you say Singapore is like Vienna, you see. Do you think that Asia should be still modeled in the image of Europe? Is my question. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How European think? Do you think how to get rid of this binary, if I would say binary model, binary vision, binary history of development or model of development like that? And second, very quick question about this Helmut Kohl, East Germany and Western Germany. Do you think that Germany might be better off if it would have adopted the 10-something model of one country and two systems? Thank you.
First question is about, do Europeans think in a linear fashion,
Yeah.
Asians in a cyclical fashion,
Yeah.
and should Germany have remained as one country, two systems?
Now, I think politicians normally think in short term, and how to be re-elected, how to survive the next regional election, what are the polls saying next week. So it is more and more, it was easier in previous years because the media are more and more pushing and pressing to instant answers. Not? Today you have you are asked about questions. If I would sit here and it is an international conference, I could be asked in the same moment about a question which has arisen in Indonesia at the same moment, and I've not informed about it because I had a speech for more than half an hour and I'm not informed about the problem, but I should say something. And if you don't say anything, it could become very critical. So politicians tend to be absolutely short-term oriented, which is not good in my opinion. Smaller countries have better opportunities. They can create a certain consensus. This is what happened in Singapore, what is possible in Austria. But big countries have really much more problems. Therefore, they avoid sometimes too much contact with the press, with the public opinion, which is also not good. I think both Asia and Europe have their history, and history can be a burden. So never forgive. Never forget. And if I would remember what happened in 1648, or the Serbs, what happened in 1389 on the Amsel field, where the Turks defeated the Serbs. If you never forget, you can never forgive. And this is a big, big burden. On the other side, historical experience can also create a better understanding of the situation. So I think linear and cyclical, this is not a contradiction in itself. I think we should be aware of history, but not overloading the boat. This is my personal experience. We should know about history. At Sarajevo, when the Austrian prince was shot down. But okay, this was one attempt, one killing, but was not Bosnia. It was not the people, and it's over. And fortunately, it's over with the Austrian-Hungarian monarchy. That we are a small, democratic, very competitive state. So history can be a burden, can be an opportunity. So this is one element. And I think more and more Asians and Europeans are able to accept a different way of thinking. And this is important because it enriches us. I was last October traveling through Nepal, and I went around Mount Kailash. I read a lot of Buddhist thinkers at the time, philosophers, and it was one of the best time I've ever had. It was a long dream that I'd take, so to say, kind of a sabbatical month, to develop a different spirit. And this enriched me. And I hope the same is possible for Asian politicians or business people or scientists to learn a little bit about the way we think and we experience our life. On Germany, I think de facto they are living on a different speed. And so the East Germans caught up, but not 100%. You can still see a difference in lifestyle, in the way they think, in the way they see the state should have a say. Especially the role of the state is a completely different way. East Germans and West Germans look at problems. But I think, all in all, it was the only way to live with in one country, one currency, one system, and I think sooner or later it will be possible that these new provinces, new regional states will reach the same level than the Western provinces.
Astrid, you have a question? Oh, and then after that, yeah. Next. Maybe we'll take both the questions.
My name is Astrid Tuminas, Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. Dr. Schussel, I haven't read Dominique Moisey's Geopolitics of Emotion, but I would hypothesize that the culture of humiliation would be referring to Russia. What were the Europeans thinking at the end of the Cold War when they opted not to integrate Russia regionally, especially from such institutions as NATO? And do the Asians have it right today when Asians, especially here in Southeast Asia, seem to be opting for regional engagement and integration with such difficult countries as Burma? Thank you.
Shall we take the other question too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just, my name is John Mannion. I'm from the MPP program here in the Lee Kuan Yew School. I'm from Ireland.
He's from an Asian country.
I'm from Ireland, and I'm very happy that you described Austria as a small country, because from an Irish point of view, we don't see Austria as a small country. It's a very large Central European country. But my question is about the Lisbon Treaty. Now, obviously, we had 2 votes in the Lisbon Treaty, and one of the things that was pushed during the treaty negotiations and the talk about the treaty was we were going to make Europe stronger, and Europe was going to have a bigger profile on the international stage. Now, I'm just asking you from the point of view of a European statesman, do you think the election of an unelected, a woman who's never been elected to any position as the foreign minister, and also a leader who's only been in power for maybe 1 year from a small European nation, really will give Europe the clout on the international stage in Beijing, in Moscow, in Washington, to negotiate the problems that we need to face in the coming future? Thank you.
Well, you got 2 tough questions.
So first, I think it's absolutely right that ASEAN tries everything to integrate different countries, and on a very different stage, economically, politically, culturally. And this is absolutely okay. I understand this. And I think the European Union has shown that we were able to integrate former dictators, former dictatorship countries like Spain, Portugal, or Greece. And they are totally normal democracies today, because the example is the best teacher. And the same hopefully will happen with Myanmar. This is by far not the regime we and you would support, would appreciate, but I think it's important to integrate them, to give them the feeling they have a say, to invite them to see what is possible and what is not possible, but also to tell them what we feel about them, how they treat, for instance, opposition politicians, press, journalists, etc. This is important. Not to be silent, not to accept everything, but to accept them. This is important. And I think ASEAN is also absolutely right to develop, to invest much more in regional cooperation. I think everything starts with good neighborhood, and everything starts not with the globalized exchange of trades, but with the neighbors. ASEAN has an enormous potential in this respect, by the way. So this is my first remark. On Ireland, you know, the Irish and the Austrians are very, very similar. A little bit same size, 5 million or 4 million, and a lot of people emigrated to other parts of the world. And Austria, loving music, green islands or green country, very effective, using the European Union as an enormous trampoline to develop a positive situation. And I'm sure the Irish will overcome the present economic problems. On Lisbon, really, I didn't believe from the very beginning in this sentence of the new persons must be traffic stopping characters and charismatic people stopping the traffic in Beijing. Okay. My personal favorite, by the way, I have to say, I formulated it in a positive way. My favorite pair would have been Tony Blair. As a, you know, there's always a big consensus in Europe. You need somebody from the Social Democratic side and somebody from the Christian Democratic side. And I would always have been favoring Tony Blair as the new president, and Ursula Plasnik, the Austrian foreign minister, as from the Christian Democratic side, as a very outspoken, very tough, and very professional lady for foreign affairs. And I think this would have been something. I think the Iraq case, the Iraq war, what de facto stopped Tony Blair, is crazy, because he will never start a war again as president of the European Council. And I think he would have learned his lessons. So it was not possible because the Social Democrats blocked Tony Blair, not we. Anyway, and now we should give the new couple, the new dream couple, a chance. I think Lady Ashton is not a trained diplomat. This is true. On the other hand, she was negotiating trade matters, which is a very complicated and a very tough issue on the world scene. Give her a chance. And I find it a little bit unfair how from the very beginning some people, especially the French, are undermining the credibility. No, this is not fair, because the French got enormous credibility, and Michel Barnier, for instance, is one of the best commissioners. I know him. I know him well. He was commissioner. He was foreign minister of France. He was minister for agriculture. He has now the very important portfolio for the internal market, one of the most important portfolios. So I think, why cheating or why criticizing others? Give him a chance.
Okay, a lady over here and the lady over there. And then I think this will be the last two questions, because we've gone past our time already.
Sir, my name is Jessica. I'm from the LKY school, and I'm quite frightened to say I'm from China, because you just think. Okay, my question is, your answer that that Europeans can think. Make me thinking that it seems that what the Europeans think and how the Europeans think sometimes depends on what and how the Americans think. So my question is, when can the Europeans think independently, and how should the Chinese think in order to reach the Europeans? Thank you.
That's okay. And the next question. You must say the questions are getting tougher and tougher.
Yeah, it's good. Okay, don't stop them.
I promise my question will be easier. My name is Angelina Grasso-Guma from Austria. I understand, Dr. Schussel, you're you're the president of the Foreign Policy and UN Association. I think some of us would be quite interested in learning what that association does and how you think it works to further the goals that you have set out today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, first of all, I think America is the new guy on the scene, right? Because China is and India and others were here for centuries. The Europeans are here for, in the minimum, 3 centuries, three millennia. So America is the youngest on the world scene, the youngest country on the world scene. And there's an interesting say. From I think this is this famous basketball star, Yao Ming, is his name, yeah. And Obama mentioned him, and therefore I'm quoting what this basketball star said. No matter whether you are a new or an old member in a team, it needs time to adjust to one another. This is true. This is true. I think we Europeans never think in the same way than the Americans think. It's really, I can find, I'm no diplomat anymore, no minister, so I can speak freely, and I find 20 reasons why I'm really criticizing or critical on America. I find also a lot of common interests and positive elements in the American history and American policy today. And sometimes the Europeans should be a little bit more aware of what is going on in the world, etc. But your question, can Europeans think and why should they think? My answer is yes, we must think. And we have to think in a different way, because thinking is the only power we have. Europe has nothing. We have no real resources, oil, gas, a little bit, but not enough, minerals, etc. The only power we have is brain power, the muscle between our ears. This is we have to train this muscle. Mm-hmm. So if we don't think, where by the hell we will land? It will be ridiculous. But we have to think in a different way. We have not to be concentrated on our own well-being, on our guaranteeing the status quo. This is the biggest danger, by the way, in politics as such, to preserve the status quo. If you do that, you are lost. You have to think 2-3 steps ahead. And as a politician, you can be punished for that. And I was punished. I lost the election, for instance, in autumn of 2006, because maybe we were a little bit too far ahead okay, fine, this is the price. But if you are only interested in short-term moments and visions, okay, you can't gain anything. Good policy is ready to be wounded for what you are standing for. So this is the lesson we should learn. And you, the younger generation, or most of you are the younger generation, you should really be courageous. And the smaller and medium-sized states and politicians, be courageous, speak loud, be heard. Don't kowtow to the big ones, not to America, not to China, not to India, not to the European Union, not kowtowing at all. Stand up, speak loud, be heard. Think big.
And the question about the association.
Association, thank you.
Yeah.
This is, we have we have several hundred members, mostly, by the way, young members. This is mostly students and people in the diplomatic service or in international business, etc. And we offer them, first of all, informations. We have a Wednesday club now, where ambassadors, business people, distinguished people can come and speak every Wednesday from 11 in the morning to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We are open. Everybody can come and discuss Chatham rules confidentially, no publishing. And this is, so, for instance, the Ambassador Vukovic came from Russia recently back. He was 15 years, 3 terms serving in Russia in different capacities. Informed now his legacy after his retirement. What is his impression on Russia? Fascinating. 60 people were there, 1.5 hours discussion. So fresh from the horse's mouth, so to say. Second, we offer big public lectures. They are, of course, then open for journalists and media, etc. And we have, for instance, Javier Solana, Mohamed El Baradei was with us, 500 people attending such public lectures, etc. And then we have think tanks or committees discussing in detail what is now our thinking on Russia. Is there a new development? What about the nuclear threats? EIO, for instance. We were together, by the way, should I say that in a group of wise men. By the way, we had only 2 women, and only 2 wise men, of course, discussing the future of the EIO for the next decades to come. Fascinating. Huh? And such things should be, and by the way, we were the only one a little bit more critical on the nuclear issues. All the others were absolutely favoring and ambassadors of the nuclear future. Okay, at the end, they were much more realistic due to our work and our arguments. So I think this is what we offer. No? Discussions, a platform to offer some. Ivo Sanader, for instance, the former Prime Minister of Croatia, was with us, or we would invite Madeleine Albright, the former Minister, Secretary of State, or Yevgeny Primakov, who was Prime Minister of Russia and Foreign Minister, and he was always in some areas when something happened. In '56, he was in Hungary. In '68, he was in Prague. When the war in Middle East broke out, he was in Palestine. So, this is what we offer, and I hope it will work.
Well, I think Chancellor Schussel has been very generous with your time already. Unless you want to get one last question, quickly.
Or 2 or together, whatever you want.
Dr. Schussel, 2 days ago, Ukraine had presidential elections. And with
Can you identify yourself, please? Yeah.
My name is Wolfgang. I am an Armenian working here at the Chinese International School. 2 days ago, Ukraine had presidential elections with a very small margin, just 1% difference. It is a very big threat of splitting the country apart, knowing the perspective, like the issue of Ukrainian politics. How do you see the influence of Ukrainian elections on European Union and possible influence of Russia on that? Thank you.
Any more last questions? Okay, last one here.
My name is Frank Eisenhaber. I'm from ESTA Bioinformatics Institute.
From where, sorry?
From the Bioinformatics Institute, ESTA.
Oh, in Singapore, yeah.
Here in Singapore, yeah. If you had a possibility to read the political discussions in Asian newspapers, then you would see that the European American model of a democratic society is discussed unfavorably compared with a more paternalistic type of state. And recent development provides quite a large number of arguments to support such type of thinking. For example, the exploding state debt in Europe, fueled by the short-term responsibility of the political elite, is one of these dangers. Your government was one of the more serious attempts in Austria to put a stop on the escalating state debt in your country. And I think the maximum that you have achieved was to have a couple of years with no substantial increase of state debt. Do you see any possibility that the European countries will someday manage to restrain that danger and to live within their earnings?
Two very good and difficult questions. Ukraine. So first of all, I think Ukraine is one of the key countries in the region. This is 50 million people, a very rich country, a very interesting country from the geographic location, and a country in transition. I think the election, it doesn't matter if the majority is big or it's a slight majority. In most democracies, there is a very close fight at the end. Look to Germany, look to Great Britain, the incoming election, look to America, look to Austria, that I lost by a tiny margin with less than 1%. So this is no matter, and I think at the end the election was monitored internationally, and I think it was a democratic election. And I think Yanukovych is a politician. Of course, he's an old hand. He will stabilize in his direction, not in the Tymoshenko direction. But I think it was a necessary swing back. If you look what the Orange Revolution could not achieve, people were not so much in favor of Yanukovych, but they were blaming Tymoshenko and the present president for what they did not achieve. They quarreled, they fought every time on a very personal basis. So this is over. And I think the Democrats in such a critical situation should unite and not waste their energy to fight against each other. And the third person, that in this case, Yanukovych, will laugh. But I think Ukraine, nevertheless, is an important country and will sooner or later look to the West, will adapt also, of course, to Russia, but they will go their own way. This is good. Second question, I mean, it was possible during my tenure to reduce the debt, the public debt of Austria by, let's say, 10%. When I started in 95 as party chairman, it was 10% higher than we left, below 60%. Of course, you are right, now it's going up. And I'm not so much concerned about the public debt increase in the moment. This was necessary to stabilize the banking system. That was absolutely okay. I don't criticize that. What I'm criticizing, and to be very frank on that, is this not only in Europe or in Austria, same even more in America. This is the way the public debt explodes. Normally, everybody says the more deficit, the better. That Keynesianism, the more, the better. That more impetus, more stimulus to economy. But this is not true. If you read your friend, and I admire him also, one of the best columnists of the Financial Times, this is Martin Wolf. He wrote, I think 2 weeks ago, he wrote a very interesting article. You should read it or find it in the internet, saying that only 1/3 of the stimulus package was really spent in a way stimulating the economy in a good way. Because stimulus make only sense if you detect and develop new markets, or innovative products, or you reform in a structural way, a bridge, so to say, structural reforms for a short period of time. Only 1/3, less than 1/3 of the Obama package was spent in such a positive, structural-oriented way. 2/3 were spent just for consuming. And this is over. Same in Europe. European governments spent more than 200 billion euro within 12 months for stimulus. For, how would they call it in English? This is car, this is Prämie. How do we call it? Cash for clunkers. Yeah. This is ridiculous. Okay, 12 months, the car producing industry and the traders were happy. But after 12 months, the same problems are there. Yeah. So the next year will be worse than we would have done nothing. Strange. Or if you look now to the Senate, now one senator is blocking everything what Obama, a Democratic senator by the way, is blocking everything what Obama intends to get because he wants to get a subsidize for his constituency. I mean, this is mad. Yeah, sure, but not in the same way. So what I'm really criticizing is not the stimulus as such. I would be happy if the same amount of money would have been used for a structural, new market developing, innovative way. De facto, it's going the other way around. The expenditures for R&D are going down in America, in Europe. Hopefully not in Austria. Not in Singapore, by the way. And not in China. This is fantastic. If you look that the Chinese authorities are able to invest within 2 years, I hope the numbers are right, $200 million were spent for stipendia, for fees, student fees, etc., 2 years ago. Now, $2.7 billion. Now, this is something. This is an stimulus. So, I mean, I'm not criticizing the debt as such. And the debts will go down. Of course, it will take, let's say, in a minimum 10, 12, 15 years to come to the same level than we have now. But it should have been used in the right way. This is not the case.
I began my remarks by describing what a gutsy politician Chancellor Schussel was. I want to end by building on a story he told about our partnership together when both of us were serving on President Ernesto Zedillo's commission to review the future of IAEA. And as he said, there were most of the commission members who I guess were nuclear hawks. And there were two small guys who stood up there, Wolfgang and I, and said, hey, think about nuclear safety issues. And that's when I discovered what a strong and powerful fighter he was. And that's why I said you must come and share your guts and your skill with the students, because we need role models like you for our students to see and to learn from. So thank you very much again.
I thank you.
For coming to the school.